This is chapter number 15, Public Economics of your economics textbooks, and we will study what do you mean by what does term public and economics mean to us. It is basically a branch, public economics, it is a branch of economics. Alright, it is a branch of economics. It is one of the type of economics you study microeconomics, you study macroeconomics. This is public economics. Public economics means when the government is preparing the budget and it is chalking out from where it's going to receive the money and how it will spend the money. Basically, preparation of the budget is known as public economics. From where it is earning, what are the revenue sources, and where in the social welfare it will spend the money. All that is known as public economics. When the government is earning money, it is spending, it is always understood that it is spending money for the social welfare of the country, of the people, of a community. Alright, so that study is known as the public economics. A public budget, basically it means is a systematic estimate of government revenue and expenditure for a period of 1 year. Alright, under public economics you study the budget preparation. Now that budget is for a duration of 1 year. 1 year means it starts on 1st of April and it is till 30th of March. That is one financial year. The budget runs for this year. They will see how they are going to meet their expenses, and how they will meet the expenses when they will earn good incomes, right? So they are generating the sources of income in order to meet their expenses. For that purpose, the budget is prepared for a year. As per Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, a statement of estimated receipts and expenditure of the government of India has to be laid down before the Parliament in respect of every financial year starting from 1st of April and ending on 30th, or you may say it's basically 31st of March. Alright. The annual financial statement is the budget of the central government. Alright. How many things you study under the budget? You have the 5 following things you study under the budget. First thing that you study under the budget is systematic estimate. Your budget is an estimate. You don't know. You are just on the basis of the experiences, past data. You are just preparing an estimate, but that estimate is systematic. You will see that okay, these are the sources from where you might get income, or you might get incur some losses or expenses. On that basis, a systematic estimate is made. That is known as a budget. Second, you study the period of the budget. Period of the budget is 1st April to 31st of March. That is one full year, financial year. Third is presentation of the budget. How the budget is presented. The budget is presented by the finance minister of the country in the parliament before the members of the parliament. It is presented by the finance minister in the parliament. It is discussed, and if there are any changes, it is revised. So next is revision in the budget estimates. Alright, this thing takes place, that is the revision in the budget estimates. And next is objectives. Why do we prepare budget? You have more of employment generation in the coming year. You have more of social development. There are no regional disparities. All regions, all states are equally developed. So in order to have equal development, you need to have regional development. That is another objective of preparing the budget. Next is infrastructural development. Wherever we lack in factories, machines, roads, dams, wherever the infrastructure is lacking, in that through the budget, the infrastructural development also takes place. Then you have the economic development also discussed under the budget, and money is allocated for that purpose also. Alright, you will study the objectives of the budget. The government budget aims at achieving certain socio-economic objectives. First is social development. Alright, This is, you cannot say first is economic development, because budget preparation is undertaken to achieve the socio-economic objectives. So first is always the social development of the country. Through the budget, the government aims at improving social development in the country. You know, the basic things that should be provided: health, sanitation facilities, family welfare, education, literacy, health standards. All these are come under social development, and this becomes the primary objective of preparing a budget. Next is economic development. See, only just preparing, maintaining the health standards, or just you are spreading the literacy or awareness, that will not suffice the purpose. You need to have economic development so that your country stands among the best developed countries of the world. If economic development is increasing, definitely the level or the standard of living will also increase. If the standard of living is increasing, the people will have more of income, and they will be more aware of their rights, they will be more aware of their health, and definitely social development will take place automatically. So funds are also allocated to areas of infrastructure that would result in the economic development. Next is regional development. There are certain regions, there are certain states, there are certain areas in the country which are not fully developed, or which are lacking behind the other. So you have some special areas are spotted, some special ways and means are carried out, so that the areas which are not performing, or which are the non-performing areas, those areas are spotted and they are allotted special money for that, right? So regional development means special areas are traced and money is allocated to those areas. That is regional development. Next is reduction of inequalities. Budget, if you see, there are more of rich people and there are less, you have more of poor people, and there are there are many people who have so much of money. Now they are earning money, but the poor people are not getting the right kind of, or the right amount of money that they should be receiving for the work they are doing. So how they will reduce the inequality? They will tax high on the people who are earning high. Alright, so the money is extracted from the rich people in the form of taxes, and it is given to the poor people in the form of subsidies, in the form of like you have fertilizers, social securities and other things. So budget aims at reduction of inequalities of income. Therefore the government allocates funds for social security, food, subsidy, fertilizer, subsidy to the farmers, and so on. Next is employment generation. Right? Budget will also see that the government aims at generating employment. Funds are allocated for various employment generation schemes. You have National Rozgar Yojana, then you have different Swarojgar Yojana. Under these schemes, money is allocated for these schemes also. Then you have the infrastructural development taking place with the help of budget. Then you have the sectoral development and upliftment of the weaker sections. So these are the objectives of preparing a budget. Next is components of government budget. You have three components: receipts, expenditure, and deficits or surpluses, right? These are the components of a budget: receipts, expenditure, and surpluses or deficit. Now you will study under receipt, you will have revenue receipt, capital receipt. First we will study the revenue receipt. Alright, revenue receipt and capital receipt. Under revenue receipt you will have tax revenue and non-tax revenue under the revenue receipt. And under the capital receipt you have the following items as borrowings, recovery of loans, and other capital receipts. Alright, you have borrowings, recovery of loans, and other capital receipts. Alright, so you have components, you have receipts, expenditure, and surpluses and deficit. So you have the receipts, you have, that is the money that you are receiving through your budget. Alright, you are allocating something, you have certain expenses, but you have certain sources of income also. Those sources are divided into revenue and capital. Revenue means you are getting money that you are getting on a very natural or very time to time basis. Alright, like tax revenue. Tax is charged every year, or tax may be charged after few months or any other basis. So tax revenue is government is getting money in the form of taxes. Other revenues also government is getting through the non-tax revenue. How government is getting in the form of capital? Borrowings. Government, you don't borrow every time, right? You borrow once. So borrowing is you are getting money, or you are receiving the money to meet your expenses in the form of borrowing. So borrowings are categorized under capital receipts. Recovery of loans. If you have made any kind of loans, then you have definitely you will recover it, right? And then you have other also like disinvestments. You are selling up your investments. In that way you can get money. Alright, so these are the other ways of getting money. So receipts may be in the form of revenue and capital. Revenue is tax revenue and non-tax revenue. Capital, you have the borrowings, recovery of loans and others. Next head, that is you have received the money, you are going to expend that money, or there will be expenditure incurred. You have revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. The expenditures, now we will study revenue and capital expenditure in detail. Revenue expenditure is the expenditure that is made by the government on routine basis is known as revenue expenditure, and the expenditure which is made for a long time, like you are investing money or you are making an expenditure that is not on day-to-day basis, that is known as the capital expenditure. So the revenue expenditure is recurring in nature, that is it comes on routine basis. It does not result in the creation of assets. It does not directly increase the productive capacity of a nation. In India, a major part of revenue expenditure of central government is non-development in nature. How you are getting, where you are spending the money? Interest payment. Major part of the revenue expenditure is interest payment. Government is paying 30% of central government's expenditure is paying the interest. Because it has taken money, so interest is a revenue, because interest you have to pay every now and then, right, or the time decided. Then under revenue, that also comes subsidies. The central government's main expenditure is for providing subsidies to the farmers, providing subsidies to the small scale or the cottage industry workers, or the cottage industry people who are managing it. The subsidy is the difference between the cost price to the government and the issue price to the consumers. Then on administration also, the government incurs lot of revenue through administration and defense revenue expenditure. Alright, it is spending a lot of money on defense, administration, subsidies and interest payment. Now where government is spending the money in the form of capital expenditure. Alright, where government is spending money in the form of capital expenditure, productive in nature, that certain is like you have power generations, different projects, government is giving tractors and other doing other works like building canals, tube wells, supplying all this. This is a capital expenditure made by the government. Then you have expenditures on housing, parks, gardens. These are another expenditure areas. Social development, construction of schools, hospitals, this is again another capital expenditure area. Then you have remuneration, that is oil, gas plants, etc. So these are all coming under capital expenditure, and you have the revenue expenditure. Last component is surpluses or deficits. Sometimes you would have more of income and less of expenditure. When you have more of income and less of expenditure, that is a surplus. Sometimes you have less of income but you have to spend more. That is known as a deficit. You have, now we will study, you have the revenue deficit and you have the fiscal deficit. Revenue deficit means when your revenue expenditure is more than your revenue receipts. It is expected that revenue deficit of the central government may be wiped out in the near future and there may be revenue surpluses. So surplus is when you have more of income and less of expenditure, and deficit is just the opposite. Revenue deficit means we are studying the deficit because in a country, as per the economist and other people who are undertaking these studies, say that you have revenue deficit. Revenue deficit means more of revenue expenditure, less of revenue incomes. But they say in some time in the near future, the situation will be just the other way around. It will be, you will have more of revenue surpluses and less of revenue expenditures. Next is fiscal deficit. So fiscal deficit is when the total expenditure, total means this, revenue and capital and revenue and capital. So fiscal revenue here means only revenue excluding the capital, but fiscal means revenue plus capital. Okay, fiscal means revenue plus capital. So if total expenditure is more than the total receipts, that is known as the fiscal deficits. And in order to meet the fiscal deficit, the country or the central government is means meeting its deficit by the way of borrowings. So these are the components of the budget: the receipts, the expenditure, and the surpluses or the deficits, right? Next thing that we will study is factor influencing the government budget. There are certain factors that are influencing the budget. Government budget is an estimate of revenue, receipts and expenditure for a period of 1 year. Certain factors are considered by government in estimating the receipts and the expenditure, which are as follows. There are certain factors which are affecting the budget. First is the economic situation. If there is recession, means if the industries are not working good, there is a recession in the country, so there will be more subsidies provided by the government to the people, to the manufacturers, so that they can manufacture more in order to create demand. So it is the economic situation that is prevailing in the country and forcing the government to take certain steps. Next is you have the infrastructure needs. The level of infrastructure needs influences the allocation of funds. In the developing country like India, infrastructure facilities as roads, power are poor, right? So there is a need for the infrastructure needs. Government needs to allocate more funds towards the capital expenditure. So infrastructure, the infrastructural sector that requires more money, right? So more money is allocated in the budget. Next is the level of employment. Government needs to focus on this area, that is employment. That is very important. There are many youth, there is high number of people that are unemployed or underemployed. Therefore, government may focus on rural employment generation schemes, and there could be certain steps or more money should be allocated in the area of employment. Then you have the social indicators also. The government may consider social indicators as the level of literacy and other factors, that is education, health, family welfare, and see that it is more money is allocated to the social in the upliftment of the social factors. Government is constantly giving money or constantly at its level opening school, hospitals, and providing other social facilities to the people in the country. And so therefore the money, the defense services are also included, which are not exactly social, but money is allocated towards these. You may count them under infrastructural or administration needs. Then you have the national security, as I was talking about. You have the national security. Government is allocating a lot of funds towards the defense system of the country. Government has to allocate for, you have adequate provision must be made in the budget for defense expenditure, revenue expenditure, and as well as capital expenditure. Then you have the regional development. Regional development also, the government is allocating money, alright. The government must consider the level of regional development. In India, the regional development needs to be given focus. Government must make provision for the funds towards regional development. There are many areas which are progressing, which are going high up, but there are certain areas which are facing heavy downfalls. So government is allocating money to those special areas or backward areas, so that they could be they could be brought at par to the areas which are developed and doing good. Then you have the economic condition of the people, past performance of the economy. According to that, the budget, these are certain factors which help the government in preparation of the budget, or that influence the budget. Of you have the past performance, like the government must consider the past performance of the economy also. Sometimes they say that you are burdening the people with heavy taxes, right? So people have paying more, but they are not able to buy the product, and therefore you have there are certain you don't have local markets for your goods. So the government should lessen or easyfy these were certain factors that are influencing the budget. Next is the taxable income. We will see what is the taxable income, and then you have the types of the government budget. First is types of government budget. You have three types of budget. You have the surplus, then you have the deficit budget, and you have the balanced. Alright, three types: deficit, surplus and balanced, right? First we will study what do you mean by the surplus budget. When you will have more of income and less of expenditure, that is known as a surplus budget. A surplus in the budget helps to any debt that is taken by the government, that is done. You have to control the surplus budget, helps to control the inflation. Then government reserves are increased, taxes burden is reduced, saving. Government could also save, and there could be more of capital formation. So surplus budget helps these following ways. So then you have the deficit budget. The deficit in the budget takes place when the estimated receipts are less than the expenditure. So whatever estimation you have done, that is, you have less of the receipts and you have more of the expenses. India used to resort to deficit budget prior to 97-98, right? So India adopts zero deficit budget or balanced budget. Due to deficit in the budget, the government resorts to deficit financing, that is heavy borrowing from the RBI. The main purpose to discontinue deficit budgeting is, earlier, you know what, India used to go on this form of budget, that is deficit budgeting, right? And for that purpose it used to go in for heavy borrowings from the Reserve Bank of India. So but now it has discontinued the deficit budgeting. Why? Because to control inflation, to reduce unproductive expenditure and impose financial discipline in the government. If you are taking, suppose you are making a deficit budget where you have estimated more of expenses and less of income, so and you are borrowing so much of money from outside sources, definitely if you are getting lot of money, you will spend also in that way. So government has discontinued the deficit budgeting now. Third type is the balanced budget. A balanced budget takes place where the estimated receipts are equal to the estimated expenditure, right? You have receipts equal to the expenditure. What happens here in surplus? Receipts are more than the expenditure, alright? But when you talk of deficit, receipts are less than the expenditure, and balanced, if you talk, it is receipts are equal to expenditure. Okay, so a balanced budget takes place when the estimated receipts are equal to estimated expenditure. Since 97-98, India started to adopt balanced budget. In India, the revenue deficit, that is excess of revenue expenditure over revenue income, is matched by capital surplus, right? So many people, they are in the favor of a balanced budget. They say whatever money is received, that the total amount, the whole amount is spent, alright? So why? Because it helps in controlling the inflation. This is the balanced budget is in study now, and people are using the balanced budgeting technique. Why? To control inflation, as expenditure is incurred from the receipts only. Therefore, can the price be stability in the country? There can be a price stability in the country. Next is financial discipline. You have a balanced budget, you know this is your receipt and this is how you're going to spend. When you used to get into a deficit budget, there would be more of expenditures. You would note down you're going to spend money on this, and you would borrow recklessly without deciding that is that expenditure important. Do you require money for it? Even if you don't require money for it, but you were still borrowing, right? So in this case, you know you don't have to borrow because this is the money you will be spending. So there are certain expenses which are not important and which are not taken into consideration. So government's borrowings are also lessened. Then it is you have reduction of unproductive expenditure. There are certain expenditures which the government used to make. They were considered as unproductive, but still it was making. So with the help of balanced budget, it has cut off, or it has it has been completely deleted from the list. So these are the different types of budget: surplus, deficit and balance. The next thing that we will study is taxable income. What do you mean by the term taxable income? See, taxable income is that income which is subject to tax. Whatever income is being taxed is known as the taxable income. Taxable income can be divided into two groups: individual taxable income and corporate taxable income. First, you will study the rate of taxes changes depending upon the changes announced by the government from time to time. So tax structure changes every time. First is individual taxable income for the year 11-12 was, you have the tax slab and you have the rates. You have 1,80,000. This is the level of income, and you have the rate of interest. Alright, level of income is starting from 1,80,000, 1,80,000 to 5 lakhs. Right? If your income is between 1,80,000 to 5 lakh, you will be paying 10% of the tax. This is in the form of percentage, 10%. Alright. Next is 5 lakh to 8 lakhs. If your income is between 5 lakh to 8 lakh, you will be paying 20% of interest. This is in the form of percentage. So, alright. Next is 8 lakh and above. Right? You will be paying how much? 30%. So this is known as the tax slab. Alright, this is the tax slab. Income below 1,80,000 is exempted for the income tax for males, and 1,90,000 is exempted for the females. If your income is less than 1,80,000, you will not be paying the taxes. That is for the males. And if your income is less than 1,90,000, in the case of females, you will not be paying the tax. Your income should be 1,80,000 more than 1,80,000 for the males and more than 1,90,000 for the females if you have to be in the tax brackets. These are three brackets: 1,80,000 to 5 lakh, 5 to 8 and above. So these are the three brackets or the ranges that they have given. A corporate firm's taxable income, domestic and Indian, this is the individual taxation we were talking about. Now we will study the corporate firm's taxable income. Domestic Indian companies 30% plus surcharge on taxable income, and foreign you have 40% plus surcharge. So you have corporate also, you have the domestic and you have the foreign companies. Alright, so domestic companies you have 30% plus surcharge on taxable income. So domestic is 30% plus surcharge on taxable income, and foreign companies you have 40% plus surcharge of taxable income. Right? So this is about the taxable income. Then you have also a term that is budgetary accounting in India. Then you have three heads that are studied under budgetary accounting. You have the consolidated fund, contingency fund and public fund. First is consolidated fund. All receipts by the way of revenue and loans go into this, and all expenditures including repayment of loans are incurred to this fund, right? No expenditure from this account can be undertaken prior sanction of the parliament. So all receipts by the way of revenue and loans get and expenditures, all the revenues, incomes and expenditures are going through this fund, that is the consolidated fund. Then you have the contingency fund. It represents certain amount of money at the disposal of the government to meet the contingencies. Some unexpenditures, you don't know that this expenditure will be incurred, like you have taken out some money, that there may be a natural calamity or something, that is known as a contingency reserve. Alright, certain reserves are maintained to meet the unexpected occurrence. Then you have the public fund. This fund consists of money belonging to the public. The main source of this fund may be contributions by the public to provident funds, deposits, small savings certificates. So government is maintaining money in the form of, even there are certain mutual funds and other facilities that are bought by the government in the market, and people are buying the mutual funds, securities and other investment schemes and some national savings certificates, and they are putting money. So that is the public money. The fund, though available to the government, belongs to the public. It is with the government, but finally one day or the other the public or the person who has put the money will come to take the money back. No sanction is needed for expenditure from this as it represents borrowings from this fund to meeting public expenditure. Alright, so you need not ask anybody for that budgetary account, so you can take the money easily from that fund. But when you are taking money out of the consolidated fund, you need to take the prior permission from the parliament. So under this chapter we have studied the meaning and features of the government budget, the objectives of the government budget, why the government is prepared. Then you have the components, that is the receipts, expenditures, deficits and surpluses. Then we have done the factors that influence the government budget. There are certain factors that are influencing the budget. Then we had studied the types of the government budget, that is the surplus, deficit and balanced budget. We had studied what is taxable income, that is individual taxable income and corporate taxable income. And last thing that was studied by us was budgetary accounting, that is what do you mean by consolidated fund, contingency fund and public fund.